Okay, well, it's 7 p.m., so I'm going to say we're going to start this panel. First off, I'd like to thank all of you for attending today. Actually, I can't say I was expecting this kind of turnout, especially for an unknown publisher like IGRE Publishing is, so thank you for attending. This is going to be making Western manga / comics, generally a presentation on how, say, IGRE Publishing goes about makes comic projects, primarily Songs of Ahrea project that's still ongoing. To start off announcing us, my name's Erik Evjen. I'm the founder of IGRE Publishing. I'm kind of like the big boss of the company. I developed the Swordland RPG role-playing game, and also the co-creator and scriptwriter for Songs of Ahrea, which is our whole comic project. Elsewhere, I'm the president of the Great Falls, not the president, but I'm board of directors on the Great Falls Gaming Montana, which is every October in Great Falls, Montana. I also am the president, after switching over, I'm the president of the Sandbaggers Game Club, also in Great Falls, Montana. I also occasionally freelance for Society, Role Players Society Publishing on a kind of on and off basis, depending on me. So that's basically me in a nutshell. I kind of eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, so I'll leave it there. Here.
Hi, I'm Erik Pocklington. I'm the co-creator artist of Songs of Ahrea. I comics, of course, and I'm not working on that for IGRE Publishing. I do the event arts for their Facebook page. The art glamorous postcards here that I work on as well. On the side, I make collections and I sell them at various colleges around the Northwest. I'm also working on some workshops and different trips to start a circuit and go to this. Working my way up to be a comic artist.
So, thank you, Erica. Yeah, and so actually we're starting to really hit up more and more conventions as IGRE Publishing. So I mean, you'll see me pretty much everywhere in Montana. You'll see Erica just about everywhere else. So we got a pretty wide net as far as it goes. Now, getting to the actual point of the panel, since we all want to talk about comics and manga, who all likes manga? That's a lot more hands than I was expecting to see in Montana. You guys are awesome. I thought I was just like the lone otaku over here. Okay, and then I'm gonna say, does anybody like comics in here? Okay. So, to start off with, I can't say, you know, we're DC or Marvel or we're any of the big Japanese publishers out there, but this is gonna be how we approach designing and making comics when it comes from the initial plotting of ideas up to storyboarding, scripting, then getting to final art layout and distribution point. In some aspects, unfortunately, this is kind of a theoretical discussion when we get to actual distribution, as we can't say we really hit that point yet, though we do have extensive research in the area, so we can guide you as best we can during distribution. More so, we actually know what we're doing when it comes to the actual creation of comics. So to start off with, let's see, where would you even want to begin? When it comes to making a comic, it kind of depends whether you're looking to do a one-shot, which is like just a single issue, or say a graphic novel where you have like a single story idea that kind of starts and ends within several issues, if not just one. So if we're taking a look at that kind of aspect, like say, what would be a good example? I'm on the panel and I completely forgot the example I was going to use, but so when you're looking to build a comic, you have to figure out how long of a serialization you want to do for this comic, whether it's just going to be a single issue of a particular story, or if you're going to have a storyline that involves multiple characters and their evolution over multiple issues. And then you can branch out into, say, if you take a look at ongoing serialized manga comics, like say the Shonen Jump series and such, I mean, they are reaching 200-300 issues. have comics that last that long as well in America because they're still printing DC's original offerings that they've been offering since the 1940s. Really, when you're attempting to build a brand new comic idea, you have to get a general basis and a feel for how long do you want this to last. Say for IGRE Publishing's Songs of Ahrea project, it actually has its basis in the same ideas that actually birthed the creation of the Swordland RPG system, which both of these came from a campaign which actually happened to be my first role-playing campaign that I ran back in 2008. Basically, this started off as just a simple, stereotypical fantasy role-playing game campaign that kind of just really evolved into this overly crazy storyline that expanded over about 6 years or so. So when I actually started coming to develop that little role-playing game, I was like, you know, it'd be actually nice to utilize 90% of the lore and whatnot that we developed for that role-playing game and its supplementary material in an actual, like, novelization or, say, a graphic presentation. So originally we were looking to do a novelization, but then I decided that it was probably the best route to actually display this in a graphic format, such as comics, as that would have more of a graphical and visual punch to it that you would not get doing a visual novelization. Basically, we do know where and when our little series is going to end. It's not going to be a permanent, ongoing, like, say, 70, 80 years from now. We'll still be publishing Songs of Ahrea. It's a more confined format, but when you're looking at doing ongoing publishing, one of the things you do have to take into account is your cost per issue going to be able to offset the overall costs of the project when it comes to actually paying lovely people like Erik here, who do need to get paid for their services. And say, my position, I'm the script writer, so I don't have to really pay myself or the company, but for other publishers, you might have to pay out for various artists, various editors, various script writers. So when you're planning on whether you're making a serialized comic, you have to take into account that there's going to be multiple people on your team that you have to pay out. You're going to have to compensate for work and effort, and those costs will eat into your eventual profit. When it comes to determining how long you're going to have a comic series start and end, not only is it a creative process for designing and building the comic, you also have to take into the actual financial. Is it going to be feasible to run a, say, 50-issue, 60-issue comic series and still be able to break a profit, or is it going to kill your company doing this? So maybe this is getting more into the financial side of things, but it's one of the things you do need to take into account is, can we survive doing it? Do you have anything to add?
I do. If that sounds pretty ugly for you, if you're an up-and-coming artist, you can do it for yourself, sketching, inking, coloring, and it's your dream to make that magical comic book, the internet is the wonderful place to start up web comics. You can use snapgenius.com where it's free to just upload your own pages. You can go for as long as you want. You can provide your feedback and get yourself going, and then you can be popular like Oatmeal or Hyperbole and a Half, who was actually from Montana, who made these comics, and after a few years just published all of her work. And you can find her work in Barnes & Nobles now, or Hastings or anything, so that's kind of cool too, where you might not be getting paid to share your story online, but you're getting a lot of fans that love your work, and they might want to buy a printed copy just in their collection to have something physical on your product in that position. So I think that's a really cool route too. It's actually something I'm looking into for my own side project. I've been working on for a few years too. Nothing published yet, but looking to work out once you get your story, environment, characters, all storyline to just start posting on stuff, share it online. DeviantArt's a good place too, and get your fan base going, and they'll definitely buy your work if they want to see your stuff.
Yes, yeah.
I just didn't hear you. What was the name of that second production that you said was based in Montana?
Hyperbole and a Half.
Hyperbole and a Half.
It's pretty funny.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you remembered we need to remember to pitch that second idea side project of yours we at some point. So,
Yeah, that was not the hammer.
oh,
Yeah.
well, maybe not so much. Well, that actually brings up a good point on the developer's side, especially on the publisher's side. One of the good ways to expand and get your art out there is to self-publish. I wouldn't recommend really going the route we're going if you're just doing it for fun, because there is going to be a monetary cost involved to it, so it will suck up a lot of your monetary resources if you go full out attempting to publish for, say, print comics and such. However, if you're just looking to get your art out there and possibly get published, the best thing you can do is actually start publishing online, or not publishing, but start displaying your art online, and also contact other publishers out there who might be willing to start publishing your work, depending on whether or not you meet their criteria. Generally, other companies have their own various ways how about they go hiring comic artists, so it really depends from company to company. Erica here actually just kind of stopped us for a little bit.
I like your stuff. Can I draw?
But then again, she's been drawing for me since like high school newspaper class. I was like, okay, Erica, here you go.
So that's another thing too. If there's a company out there, you really love their stuff, just keep out your artwork, keep practicing, go out every day, try something new. Don't ever be discouraged if somebody's better than you. Just try to see what they're doing better and learn from that, and just go out there and ask people. Go ask Nintendo, whoever, just hey, can I draw for you? The worst they can say is no. But that just means maybe you're not ready. Just keep practicing, and growing as an artist, you'll get there eventually. Go and publish your own work and show these folks and make this one day. But another thing about self-publishing that I've been looking into as well, there are different printing companies out there that let you print booklets or magazines. And I've seen a lot of artists out there at different art alleys at conventions where they sell their own art books at their tables, and they'll have different comics and stuff for you to buy as well. They might be brand, Dojichi, or their own published work, but that's another way to get yourself out there too. You don't have to go to the publishers, but it's a nice way to have a safety net, I guess. But I found places that will print you a 20-page magazine for $5 a pop, so you can do a whole set like that and see how it goes. The internet's a magical place for finding all sorts of resources and stuff to fulfill your dreams of being an awesome cover artist. I think so anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've kind of covered, I kind of went off on a tangent on the publisher side of, oh man, this costs money to do this kind of stuff. But kind of going back to the original idea, when you're going about and you're going to do a whole comic project, you need to determine the size of it, and you also need to determine what the actual content of it is, and primarily we're going to be talking about the story at this point. And this is where I gotta admit flat out, if you're looking to do something like, say, slice of life type comics or whatnot, I really can't provide you any advice in that field. I will tell you right off the bat, as a script writer, comedy is the worst thing in the world to attempt to write. It's like, I mean, it'll sound fine when you write it, it might be hilarious to you, but the problem is when you try to make it sound funny to like 90% of people that will read your eventual finished product. If it isn't actually something that's not an in-joke, or if it is just an in-joke, 90% of people are just going to look at that and they'll be like, wow, that was a weird line of dialogue this character said. So really it's something that you have to develop when it comes to script writing. It's going to be really hard to write effective comedy, and it's something even I struggle with. So if you're looking to do kind of slice of life comedy type manga comics, like, I really can't provide you much advice. My expertise on work in, say, writing and ongoing serialization of fantasy stories or sci-fi, that kind of stuff. So if you're looking to do that kind of stuff, I'm going to applaud you and I'm going to salute you, but can't say I can give you much advice in that field. However, if we're going to go look and say we want to do either an ongoing permanent serialization, or we're going to do an ongoing project that might last up to issue, say, 60 to 100 plus, You really want to develop your plot lines and your stories like right off the bat, at least the broad brushstrokes of the storyline. Since once you get to the later issues, you've got to have some resolution to things that came up at the initial start of the story. You need to actually have an initial seed of this is the setup of the world that these characters live in. Here's the setup of the major problems they run across in this world. The comic probably is going to incorporate their struggles against these problems in the world and how they go about them. And once you get to later points in the story, there has to be some kind of resolution as to are they able to overcome some of these problems, if not all of them, or is it kind of a hopeless, they're never going to get over these issues type stories. I mean, there's comics out there like, say, The Walking Dead that kind of capitalize on a permanent, everything's just getting worse and worse by issue. But then you could have the ongoing, like, say, the never-ending story, Dragon Ball Z, where it's just like, oh man, they just got done killing the worst bad guy in the world like 5 issues ago. Oh no, and now there's an even more powerful bad dude in the next issue. So, I mean, you can have those types of things. Generally, when it comes to writing, you want to have a consistent, like, major problem that your characters have to face in the overall scheme of all encompassing storylines in a comic book, or really doesn't matter when we get to talking about just storylines. When we talk about manga, it's a Japanese style of art versus a more Western comic-based art that you see in the DC world. So when we're talking about stories, though, and we're talking about plot, we're talking about character development, those are things that you'll see in any type of comic or manga-based project, regardless of what type of actual parts of the book. So, actually, I want to kind of open up the questions. Are there any specific questions people would have in regards to developing or building basic plot lines for a comic book? All right, I'll take it forward.
I know, Thor's got a couple questions. Stuff for you.
Okay, yeah.
Can you outline generally the process that you use to write a story? So, like, you sit down, you have a blank chunk of paper. What's the first thing, and you've got an idea of, like, a gist of a storyline you want to go on. How are you going to flesh that out? What are the first steps that you like to do?
Well, as I said, what I like to approach any start of a new project with is I like to take very broad brushstrokes. A lot of the storylines that I develop personally kind of generally fall more towards I have at least two varying political factions that have varying agendas that they end up going to war such over. And of course that sounds like a very basic plot line. It's been used relatively well in other series like, say, Gundam, which I mean, that's kind of always been the big deal, is varying political factions. But when I approach it, it's something that you can really adapt to make things more good versus evil. More so, things are gray. You know, both sides have very bad things about them that even though the main characters might be fighting for a particular side, those guys aren't really much better than the guys they're fighting against, so to say. So, like, eventually then I'll add on more complex. What if there's other factions out in the world that not only go up against the bad guys, they also go up against the good guys too at some point or another. So there's usually varying conflict that I'll add in due to various people wishing to have various resources in the worlds that I build. Not everybody can have the whole world, not everybody can have various little portions of the world they want, so you'll see more and more people banding up as various like factions that you'll see characters either align themselves with or they'll betray and defect from. You'll see them just kind of band up in various huge groups, and then you'll see those groups come to conflict with one another. So, I mean, this is when we're talking about very broad brushstrokes, because this is a plot line that would probably take over the course of several 30, 40, 50 issues at least. And it's not something that you can really accomplish within, say, a one-shot comic or such. So this is when we're talking kind of scale of economy, like when you want to incorporate a storyline that's really going to make a serialized comic work, you need to have very large kind of ideals at work in the story plot line to actually make it happen. You can see where characters initially kind of come into the world very naive about how it works. Then over the course of several issues, you'll see them kind of get an idea of, okay, this is why everybody doesn't like these people over here, or this is why those people don't like these people over here. Then you'll get character conflict of, oh man, so I got friends over here and there's friends over there, what side do I pick, what do I do? Then you get them onto one side, and then issues later it's like, oh, so, you know, the guys that I'm friends with, they all of a sudden decided to turn bad, what do I do now? Stuff like that, so I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent here.
Oh, good. It sounds like you like to work from a high level down. You'll start out with like, okay, this is the universe, these are the people in the factions, this is the broad strokes, these are who's fighting who. And then you get down to the details of like, okay, these are the characters in this faction at this specific time doing this specific thing, interacting with these characters doing these things, and you just kind of work down until you get down to a chunk of a story and stuff, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's something that really works well for me personally. I can't say it would work for everybody, but when you go down from the top level, you can actually see more so ideals at work, more so than actual individual characters. When you're developing the initial start of a story, you don't really want to start with just one character first and then build a world around that one character, because then you get into the very soon problem of the whole world revolves around one person. When in real life we can see, no, the world doesn't revolve around one person, unless you happen to be the President of the United States. But more so when you're developing, say, a very realistic world for a comic project, you want to have there to be actual stakes involved in the story. If something, these guys in a particular faction representing this ideal go and strive towards, how is it going to affect the rest of the world, for good or bad? And then you can develop plot lines that tie into those type of mechanics.
PB, can you take this?
Yes.
Okay, this isn't quite necessarily pertaining to storyline, but maybe a little bit. And this is a question for both of you, because I've been on both sides of this equation. What is the hardest thing about, like, what's the most challenging thing about as a writer, getting the artist to see your vision clearly and where you want to go with the story, and equally true, like, how does the artist portray that and yet still have enough artistic freedom? Like, how does that relationship work, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Okay, that sounds good. And I actually got a couple of examples here for that one. So we actually both have examples for this. Do you want to start first? Or?
I think we start first.
Okay. Well, this is a fun thing, because when we're talking about what the hardest thing is in the writer-artist relationship, of course, getting the artist to actually envision what you're envisioning in your head is a really long, tough call, because, I mean, obviously, if I see this world that I created in one way, trying to explain it to the artist and try to have, like, say, Erik here portray the world I see. She does a great job at it, by the way, but, I mean, it's really hard trying to explain it and then, in practice, have the artist hand them over to the keys to the product that you've made, and have them take over and start trying to visualize concept it. Personally, what I do is I've gone through various concept artists that will sketch out, like, say, if we have main characters for a project, not only will I have the comic artist develop those characters, but then I'll have other artists work on those same characters. So we're able to make a uniform concept of, okay, this is how this character looks and how their mannerisms would be, so on and so forth. So at times it does become like a collaborative effort of multiple artists working on designing a single character, let alone trying to build like environments or say monsters if you have terrible evil creatures in your comic or whatnot. And even going so far as to say these are like banners, flags, like everything that would be retained and useful for a particular group in a story, they're going to need all that type of stuff, concept now, whether it's like weapons that they use or it's armor they wear, or say you're working on modern setting if they're all using like space sci-fi plasma guns. What do those look like, and how do we get the artist to make it? So generally, it's a lot of concepting art that goes into it. So we'll just take multiple takes of a particular idea or concept that we want to portray until we have like finalized this is what this particular thing in the universe would look like. There we go.
Yeah, and actually that's kind of what I look forward to when people hire me to do concept art is I'll ask for a description and then I'll draft maybe for 3 or 4 things of that same thing, each one is different. And I'll ask the artist, you know, which one they like better. Maybe I like one with number 2's laser cannon or something. It just kind of meshes together. I don't spend a lot of time on it, like those are just like 5-minute sketches, just so I'm not wasting too much time. Concepting, as long as you get the right idea out there. As far as scripts go, they usually have a really good shot listing as to, like they'll say, I want it, you know, wide screen, we have this spanning panorama of environments and little dots of people on the center. Like I said, I just do really rough sketches. If it's what they want, awesome. I've also had storyboarding projects with various professors over here who are working on thesis films where we actually act out their shot list where we go through the shot, we'll be like, okay, they're in a car, scene it like this, or we just like, we act out the entire thing, and I'll draw out stick figures just so I have an idea of what the angle of where the characters are and perspective and actions or whatever. But yeah, I'm here to please the writer and make sure they get exactly what they want since they're paying you. Right there, they love your style, they hired you because they love your style, so that's where my artistic freedom comes in. I've also taken some liberty to work on his panels as well because I think storyboards and their boxes. So I've started to just make a really fun flow, like you see in various modern comics now or manga, where it's just a beautiful flow of different angles, handles on the page and stuff. Makes it fun to look at for you.
Yeah. So kind of like bouncing off of that, I was actually going to bring up the kind of allowing the way for what the artist does in regards to how you script out the project. Like IGRE publishing, when I write out the scripts, I do have a generalized like panel by panel listing of this is all the actions occurring, these are all the lines of dialogue occurring, these are the expressions that characters have going into it. There's some script writers that really don't do that at all, where it's basically just like you'll have a script like panel 1 through 6, do what you want. Here's like 1 line of dialogue per panel of what's being said during that panel, but then the artist has like total freedom of how they want to portray it. Generally, I actually do a little bit of initial storyboarding, as Erik says here, and I can even show you. This is we have a little like sample page from the initial script writing process to actual finished art. So it kind of shows off the process. You can see where I concepted the initial idea of what I wanted to have happen on page, from the script to initial storyboard to revised storyboard by the actual artist, who can draw a lot better than stick figures, and then get to actual finalized art. So we can just start passing along the packets. Here you guys go. And getting back to, say, story plotting out, one of the things that I actually really recommend all script writers and actual writers of a major ongoing project is develop what's known as a story Bible. What the story Bible is generally a accounting from the first, say, initial chapter or issue in a project, whether it's a novelization or it's a comic project like we're working on. You'll have a general outline of the entire plot from this is point A, from where characters start out, they're introduced to main characters, this is the initial conflict they come up against, until you get to the end point. Here's the ending, here's everyone who actually survived the events that occurred in the story, and this is what happened to them. So, not only in the story bubble will you have that outline, you'll also have general setting information that will outline this is the world these characters live in. This is the general conflicts that these characters face in such a world. This is like the actual economy of the world. So you kind of want to go into detail when you're developing the story Bible. Give the artist enough of an idea that this is the particular type of atmosphere we're going for in the comic project, and these are the types of concepts that will come into play as the characters start developing over the course of multiple issues. You can also see other information in there, say actual character bio descriptions.
I'm going to get it for you right now.
I can tell you, I've said like 50, 60 page documents at a time. So, yeah. It really kind of helps bridge any kind of communication gaps when it comes to plotting out the actual way we want issues to go from start to finish. Since not only will we have actual script written out and storyboards, but then we actually have all the information in between what would actually make this world click and how to make characters actually feel like they're part of a much more relevant story and actually part of the world they existed rather than just being characters that could operate without there being any actual world or environment behind them. Because the worst thing you'd want to have is a story where these characters could be anywhere whatsoever and not have anything attached to what they're doing. So, say, taking a look at a story along the lines of, say, Lord of the Rings, how that world's kind of very well fleshed out, and there's so many different facets to it, and so many different things that, say, the main conflict in that particular storyline, if those events had occurred that would lead to the downfall of this world, by the end of reading that book, you'd be very depressed. So would everybody in the actual world itself. You want that kind of emotion to be portrayed in the actual project when you're working on developing an effective storyline.
And also just have fun. How I start out stories, I usually just do a character, I'll have an era, gender, personality order, and just kind of go from there. I'll draw a little initials and like maximum or something. Just start thinking like, how did you get there? And just start kind of pushing out from there. 5 minutes practice, what kind of world this is. So it's kind of fun to just let it move like that too, and just start to develop characters like characters. That's what people just want to just having side characters to help your main character as well. So your main character is kind of just like a fresh slate for everything. So you know all your side characters, which absolutely relate to them. And then there's a overarching story that's usually understanding the environment and stuff. But I'm really bad at storytelling. This falls out of my storyline. I also like to or just ask these weird questions. What's my main character think right now? How can I make that different? What's my character actually make me more alive, whatever. Sometimes just happy accidents happen for next people parts of the stories.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that would be a good point to jump off into actual character development. And say the way I approach it is almost the exact same way I approach just overall general story building. Is I do very broad brush strokes at first for actual characters. I don't really attempt to go into writing a character fully fleshed out right off the bat, especially when you're taking in concept a serialized comic where you might have like 60, 70 issues to develop that character over a period of time. You don't want the character to be fully developed and just ready to go right out of the box. Like if you had a case where the main character is already capable of doing their best right at issue 1, there's not really going to be too much conflict or much room for improvement for that character to actually evolve into the main character role by the time you get to later issues. It's just kind of a case of, well, you kind of just have a Mary Sue operating from issue 1 all the way to the end of the story. Where more so people, not always, but most people like to see a more kind of building thrown in is what the particular term for this type of storyline is. But you start off with a character somewhat removed from conflict in the world, where it's, say, the farm boy living on a farm somewhere, not really particularly too tied into the events going on elsewhere in the country, somehow gets personally involved into those conflicts, and then being completely naive and inexperienced in how to handle those problems, eventually over the course of the story you see the character building up the skill sets to take on those problems, and at the end of the story, at the climax, the main character would actually overcome and take the problem, solve it, and then your declining action would be the resolution of this character's journey. They've gone so far and they've actually developed so much as an accident person that you get a sense of actual heroics at play, where you have the character basically overcome the main problem, like whether it's overwork, something as simple like, say, there's even comics about basketball teams and other sports where the big conflict at the stake is, can we win the basketball tournament? So, I mean, you can have stories about just anything, really. It doesn't need to be anything particularly serious. You could have a baseball team comic where it's like, oh man, like, all we want to do is win the one game since we lose every time. So the whole comic could just be this baseball team training and getting up to the point where they actually either win or, for a very dramatic effect, lose again in the final game. So, I mean, that's kind of going back into overall story development, but characters are actually so tied to the plots and storylines that you can almost not really separate them, since they're the actual vehicle of movement and just motion through a story plot. That if your characters are just static the entire way through and don't really have any event affect their outlook or personality by any bit during the course of the story, you have very kind of flat characters that it's really kind of hard for the audience to relate to by the end of it. So overall, when you're looking to develop a character, you want to leave enough room in that character's overall kind of, how would you say, story arc. You want that character to actually have room to breathe and expand, and you want every conversation or every action that character takes in the concept of an overall story. You want that character to actually grow from the initial point they start off at.
And that's what comes to, well, me anyway, when I use my characters. I love my readers to relate to the characters, and I think many authors that where they're down on their luck and there's something that you can relate to, you're not perfect, it has some sort of flaw, and you end up writing for everybody to like overcome whatever that is. And that's like the key thing to, you know, having them have room to grow and have their different issues or flaws, so that your readers are going to look for that character and that's for, and you can make them happy by the end of the story, like overcome them. I find to
Or you can take the George R.R. Martin route and build up all those connections just for that character to get killed off halfway in the story.
Yes, you can also hurt your readers and do that too. Just make them suffer all the
Don't.
time.
Please.
Yeah, that's
Thank
fun
you.
too. You can do that. I admit I've done that too. I like to have those flawed characters that are underdogs and have these struggles. When you get around those characters, they attach to them. However, when you're just talking about them, now you're a total
Indeed. And that's actually one of the things that's really hard to develop as a writer, is building a character that's not only unskilled enough that they have room to grow, but you want to build a character that's relatable. The problem with building a relatable character is if you give them too many redeeming good qualities to a character, your audience sees them more and more as a Mary Sue type character where they can do no wrong. However, if you add more and more flaws to that character, you end up with a character that the audience sees as rather weak and silly, stupid, and you see the audience actually think, why is this story focused on, say, this main character when you have two or three side characters that actually would be much more competent in what they're attempting to do. Of course, you always want there to be a primary focus on the main characters' overall adventures during a comic. But you also want side characters to be able to add on to that character's development and growth. And you don't want the main character to come to a point where the audience actually doesn't want that character around, so they can focus more so on the other cool side characters. So it's a balanced question of you want there to be room for growth, but when you're building something that people can actually root for this character, you have to give them elements of areas they need to improve in whatever particular activity they're engaging in, but not so unlikable that it seems this character is just hopeless and not doing anything or is just totally fine during the course of the storyline. So it's kind of a hard bridge because you'll find that some people would prefer your main character to actually just be winning every single conflict they come into in a storyline. But that doesn't always come off really realistic, so you need the character to actually lose at some things in order to build that underdog feeling of, oh man, you know, they aren't capable of winning at life in general, so they gotta improve to actually get to a point where, you know, they might not be perfect, but there's somebody that you actually develop an emotional connection with, since you sort of go through highs during the storyline, you see go through lows, and you get a character that people can actually relate and connect with.
That's one thing too. You're not going to use your stories and your characters. That's just going to connect with your fan base, which is awesome. Love those guys. And they're support you. And if you have 100 people that are going to buy every single thing you're going to do, awesome. But you're not going to please everybody, unfortunately, just because everybody has their own taste or whatever. So you have to let that discourage you from winning character.
Yes, that actually brings up a pretty good point. You don't want to consider your audience as everyone in the whole world. Just do that basis. People have different tastes and different styles. So if you're looking to build a comic that is like, this is going to appeal to every single person in the world, that's not going to work because there's going to be so many different varying varying plot lines within your story that is going to just pollute the product entirely, and you're going to lose the actual structure.
One of these days I'm going to do it.
So rather than focus on making every single person that will ever read this comic in history ever be happy with it, you want to focus on. So I'm writing predominantly a fantasy story. We want to make it something that would really appeal to fans of the fantasy. Or if we're building a sci-fi comic, we want to focus on people that like sci-fi. Of course, there's always room for cross-promotion and such. You can add elements of any particular genre to a different one, as long as you're able to blend them well enough. But it's not like you want to throw romance, thrillers, action, suspense, tragedy, comedy all into one pot. Then start throwing in fantasy, westerns, post-apocalyptic zombies. Like, you want to avoid doing that as much as possible, because then you'll end up with something that people will just read it and wonder what's going on whatsoever in this project. There's no actual focus to it. So, again, that might work if you're doing a comedy project, like a slice of life manga or such, but when you're focusing on an ongoing serialization, you want something that people can really focus in on just the core story and have them just kind of continue to become more and more emotionally invested as time goes on.
What are some of your influences as writers and artists, and what got you, what's so appealing about anime and manga to you as writers and artists?
I actually grew up in Japan, so that's right off the bat. Like, my parents were in the military and they spent time over there when I was very young, so that was my childhood. Grew up with family. I came back to the States, I started doing it, I love that. As far as artistic influence,
I saw somebody else that is another brand. I don't know who he is either, so I know. I said, yeah.
biggest saying this. Yeah, just some of those or different animated videos also into what's the fad styles anymore. You're seeing a lot of great styles for animated more, and I try to incorporate that into my style. Taking more and learn how people are just adapting to the new era's art and style. Girls, what do you think, Hannah? Whatever story you have.
I was trying to figure out what.
Man, this is a good question since I could go on and on and on about various animes. I will say, if you really want to get a concept of the type of storylines I was talking about, you want to watch the original Super Gundam that came out in '79. Because over the course of 50 episodes or so, you see the initial character just completely thrown into a conflict, ends up getting an awesome robot suit. You see this character not be able to actually really control the robot suit at first for several episodes until much later on in the series, about halfway, when he actually starts developing into an actual mobile suit pilot. At the same time, you have two specific sides that are going to war over resources in space and the Earth. And you see that not only do both sides actually have unredeemable features about them that would actually make it so you actually might root for the bad guys to win. You also see there's actually good characters in a way attached to the bad side. So it's more kind of realized that it's a grayish tone in storyline and plot, that there's good people and bad people on all sides. It's not just everybody on one side of the war or conflict, and the story is going to be the good guys and the other side is the bad guys. There's more of an actual good crowd. Other works that I really like, Ryu Mizano, who created the Record of Lodoss War series, which actually started out as an RPG campaign too. It's various OVA, there's a television series that came out for it, also a ton of different manga. That one is an amazing little fantasy plot line. Like, I would highly recommend watching Record of Lodoss War. Other good series, Berserk is a little bit out there and a little bit crazy, but I would recommend it if you're over 18 and you can actually stomach a little bit more graphic content than usual. It's also a highly medieval-based fantasy in a way series. Berserk.
That's a little bit more graphic.
Yeah, it's kind of more like on the horribly obscene in some issues, so it's not for the light of heart. Other wonderful things out there, Space Pirate Captain Harlock, which is kind of a more obscure and space series, but also incredible plot line. Erik has heard me talk about this probably 1,000 times. And finally, another series that I'd recommend is Area 88, which actually goes into the emotional conflicts of fighter pilots and, say, post-traumatic stress disorder and other emotional traumas. And that's actually more of the driving vehicle in the series versus actual jet fighter combat, which at first glance, that's what all the series is about, but as you go into actually reading and developing characters, these characters aren't necessarily so worried about dogfights as it is there's a lot of stuff going on in their heads as a result of the conflict they get into. So there's a lot more emotional investment of, oh man, you know, this guy's kind of crazy, but I want him to survive and get back home, and that kind of stuff. So there's a few series that inspire the work I do. Anybody have any other questions before we end off?
What inspired you? What leading roles in company and publishing did you take when first publishing your work? Were there any small companies that you said, I could do something like that, or big companies that said, oh, they have some really good qualities and do some new product, da 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 da?
Okay, good question. Personally, I'm more so focused as a RPG role-playing game writer. I do have to admit that writing, even though I love it a lot, being a script writer for comics is kind of a secondary job I took on. When I started IGRE Publishing, it was more so I wanted to develop content that I wanted to put out for people to enjoy more so than I wanted to work for another company and put out material that they wanted to put out. Of course, when you're looking just for money in the industry, it doesn't really matter where you work as long as you get the money. So at the same time, you're going to be sacrificing a lot of creative control over a project. And I mean, you could look back at the history of various DC and Marvel characters and the creators' rights conflicts they've had over, say, Spider-Man or Batman for years. Like the family of the creator of Batman is still fighting for those rights. Yeah. So when you're looking at it, when you do work for another company, you do give up a bit of creative control as to what you want to do versus what the company's overall brand image wants to present and put out there. So being an independent publisher, at least me being the creator of the company, I get to put out the materials that I actually wanted to put out. I do also try to make an effort for people that work for me, such as Erica, whenever they give me ideas that I'd actually say, you know, that actually would probably work for this. I try to publish anything else I could for those guys as well. So it's more not completely 100% creator control content in regards to the artist, but I try to give them as much leeway as I possibly can, since my personal outlook on life in regards to the creative industry is if I want to put something out there, if I want to put my ideas and the creative content that I put out, I want to do it on my own terms versus, say, being locked into a contract where there's no way out of it, and then the publisher is going to twist those ideas around. So as far as going into self-publishing, as I said before, there is a little bit of monetary cost involved. I mean, when you're working for a publisher as a comic artist, you have not too many concerns since you don't have to be the one that's actively attempting to put the comic out. But if you're doing it the self-publishing route, you assume all those costs of getting that content out. So it's kind of the fine line of, do I want to do what I want to do whenever I want to do it and put out that material, but end up taking a lot of the responsibility of actually putting that material out? Or do you want to give up some rights on how your worlds and settings and characters are portrayed, but actually end up probably making more of a financial gain that way? So not to discourage anybody from joining publishers, we want you guys to join publishers and such, but it's kind of a personal question you have to ask yourself is, if I want to go into the comics industry, how much control am I willing to give of my projects up versus your requirement for actually making profit off of it. If you're doing things just for fun, then by all means just start publishing on DeviantArt and the other online little websites out there. Because you're going to actually probably get more of an emotional kind of self-esteem boost out of that than you would attempting to lose control by having another publisher take over your project and take over control. So hopefully that answered that question.
Do you do your own printing?
Yes. Right now for publishing role-playing games, I do have a secondary company that we're publishing through, but we do handle the publishing aspects and distribution right now. Comics, we will be as well. We're trying to figure out exactly how we're going to best be serving the songs that we have. But yeah, for the most part, we're going to be fully publishing. We're just looking for the final distribution key as far as doing comic projects to make print comics keys, right? Yes. It does look like we're almost a few minutes over. I haven't had security come and kick us out yet, so if you have any last questions or comments, feel free to ask. I'm glad to help. Oh, yeah, that'd be, yeah, clap. This is actually her first panel, so I'm really proud of the job she did.
Did you go? I did, yeah. We had a table with my boyfriend about actually. So I'm going to be there again this year. So yeah, I remember you were.
All right. Well, thank you guys. It was a great panel. We'll be seeing you again tomorrow. We're doing another panel in regards to role-playing game art in the same room, same time. So.